Is Black Myth Wukong very difficult game? Too difficult? Well, I'm gonna give you my opinion. I personally think that for the majority of players, the game will definitely be very challenging at times. There are gonna be some bosses where it's gonna be very challenging to beat the boss, especially if you, like me, did the first playthrough without reading any guides or anything and knowing of different discoveries and secret areas, that some of them hold very powerful items that can help you become more powerful in the game. There's also the sense of discovery of different builds. Some of the builds can be very, very powerful. There are even ones that you can even one-shot bosses. Yeah, there are things like that. But the thing is that when you first play it and you don't really search for everything, you're gonna find it pretty challenging, and some of the bosses are very, very challenging. And by that I mean challenging, I mean like Souls game type of challenge. Alright, this will also challenge some Souls game veterans, fans of the genre of Souls-like games and Soulborne games. They will find it challenging as well. However, those who play Souls-like games have more experience in tackling difficulty like in this game, and because there is no way to actually reduce the difficulty in changing just something in the settings, you basically need to deal with it. Now, coming from Souls-like games, you're gonna have experience, you know how to tackle this difficulty, because it's very similar in many ways. Basically, don't try to roll a dodge like crazy all the time to avoid, try to time it right to not lose sync with the boss attacks. And trust me, some of the bosses there are very challenging in that aspect. They attack very quickly and very frequently, although there are some builds with certain skills that allows you to give you a breather, some room to actually heal or think about what you're gonna do instead of getting smashed by the boss over and over, like Cloud Step, for example. Another thing that you learn, and it also applies here from Souls games, is that if you have knowledge, for example, vulnerability of bosses in terms of Elden Ring game, for example, and certain builds, you can actually defeat some of the bosses very easily. Same goes here. If you read wikis, see different guides, you're gonna find things that are totally broken in this game. The question is whether you want to do that in your first playthrough, or you just want to have a very organic and straight on experience without knowing anything. Because again, knowing things also ruin some of the sense of discovery, mystery, and this is something that some players don't want to be taken away from them. Now, it's also confusing because it depends who you ask. Some say just an easy game, some will say that, some will troll, some will say that it's a very, very difficult game. It's very hard to understand. Now, I'm telling you this from an average player perspective. I'm a player I'm not anything on top of my game, but also I'm a player who dedicated and takes, for example, challenges, and I play several Souls games, which before that, by the way, I was scared of this game. I didn't even want to touch them because I was kind of playing just casual games. But basically what I'm saying is that if I tell you that the game is challenging, well, it's probably going to be for most players who play this game. And there will also be a situation where some players will admit it and some won't admit it if it was difficult for them. I mean, that's how it is. So for me, some of the bosses were very challenging and I needed several tries in order to beat them. Now, the thing is that it really also depends on you, because there are many players who don't have the time and patience to do things over and over. Although death in this game is type of the mechanic is something that you learn to enjoy, because it's not really something that, it can be frustrating, but you also understand that you learn something from each death, and it also feels very, and I mean very satisfying when you're able to beat a boss that was challenging. This is why I don't want to use anything that is totally broken. I want the challenge. Although there are ways that I know now they can really break the game totally, and some of them probably will be patched as well, and there are some even glitches, but I don't want to ruin the gameplay for myself. But then I mean the fun. There are also people who prioritize, the time. They don't have all the time to play. They come home and they want to, spend time with the kids, but also play games and don't want to really spend a lot of time struggling and being frustrated. I can also understand that as well. But this is something that I said for many other games that are difficult. Some of them are so amazing, they have great story, they have amazing combat and so many amazing things, but people just don't want to play them because they're very difficult. So I would say to you something like that. I recommend you to play the game for sure because it's an amazing game. However, if you feel that you need help, There are guides right now, people already played many hours this game and millions of players are playing it. So you're gonna find things that can help you out, kind of maybe read wikis and guide to find secret areas with some powerful items that can make the game easier for you for sure. There are even some builds that you can just one-shot bosses if you like. So things like that. So I'm saying, if you don't mind doing it, you have different ways to tackle bosses in a much easier way, in many situations. But remember the one thing, one of the greatest thing in playing challenging games, and this is one of them, a Souls game in general, Souls-like games, is because what you feel after you beat a boss that was challenging. That feeling, nothing can replace it. There's no alternative to that. It just feels so much better. You're just on top of your game. You were able to learn the fight, and it just feels amazing. And there's a very important thing that I wanted to share. This game, compared to Souls-like games, in many situations is easier in the way that, again, not saying it's a Souls-like game, there are things that are different, but there are some similarities. But what I'm saying that the way the attacks are telegraphed is easier to read. I mean, I can definitely tell you compared to many other games, the way the animation, the easing of the animation is much more forgiving to some of the most, for example, challenging games in Souls-like games, Souls games. The way to, for example, briefly stun bosses by putting the fire ring on the floor and use different attacks that can actually prevent enemies' attack from actually hitting you. Different ways to actually tackle boss fights, which are pretty forgiving in general. Still, there are fights that you are kind of forced to learn some of the moves, although they are easier to read, in my opinion, compared to many other bosses that I play in Souls games, so it was easier for me to understand the moves. Even though I'm not paying attention to every single movement of the boss, I was able to learn it generally because it's just easier to read. And basically there's more room for mistakes compared to some Souls games, some bosses in Souls games where I really needed to know what I'm doing, if not I'm get really punished by it. Maybe they should call it, I don't know, like Souls Light or something, to better represent actually how the game feels like in general. But overall, the game is challenging, so it's not like you're gonna go and feels like God of War or an action RPG where you feel overpowered. This won't be the case in this game, in my opinion, for many players. So just so you know, that's how it is, but there are ways to kind of walk around it. Reading a bit of guides, certain builds can help you out a lot. Thanks for watching.